That's a brilliant trap. Like you're talking about laying traps. This is the last specific one to Delta Force, and this is the one I wrote down earlier in the interview when you said you had retired in 2015. There's a former operator I've written about on a handful of occasions. I write about him pretty much every Memorial Day for the last several years. His name was Joshua Wheeler. He was
Yeah.
killed in 2015 on that famous ISIS raid when
Yeah.
Thomas Patrick Payne earned the Medal of Honor. If you knew Joshua Wheeler at all, would you mind saying what your memories of him was and what kind of man he was? And if you didn't, not a big deal at all. But I figured maybe you two overlap given the timelines.
We did, and we overlapped at Second Ranger Battalion too. So I knew Josh when he was a young Ranger. Um, and there are some of these guys that are just larger than life, right? Like, you know, a lot of the Delta guys are larger than life. Um, some of them are the ultimate gray man. I mean, Josh was one of those guys that he was just larger than life. Like he did it a little bit better than everyone else. Um, and he did it a little bit louder than everyone else. You know what I mean? It's like, but not loud like ego. He was just always having fun. Like he'd be laughing going through the shoot house. You know what I mean? He's laughing on target. I mean, I can almost guarantee you, I wasn't there. He was A squadron, same squadron that I was with. I wasn't there, but I can guarantee you there was laughter within somewhere happening in the middle of this, or Josh going, can you believe this? You know what I mean? Like, let's get this. Um, yeah, that one hurt a lot of guys. And I think a lot of guys are still emotionally and spiritually hurt over that one. I don't fully understand, what's happening with our guys, where they're just, they're killing themselves. They're committing suicide. And it really started in the military ranks, and then it's moved into soft, and it's starting to hit Delta, and it might be. I think I have some beliefs. I mean, what we don't lose that many guys, you know what I mean. And the other biggie though is this sense of control. I think trauma is very much tied to the lack of control. You know what I mean? So when you're a young soldier, that's why even these kids that have PTS that never were in a gunfight. It was just from mortars landing on the forward operating base. I don't dismiss that trauma because it's that lack of control. You know what I mean? And I never felt in the unit, well, ever really, that I didn't have a fighting chance. It's kind of like even if it was a Butch and Sundance event, like when Butch and Sundance, and they run out and there's this Bolivian company, like I think in their minds they're like, we got a fighting chance, and I always felt that way, that we have a fighting chance. I've never felt so far behind the black ball that I ever felt out of control or fearful. And that's one of the things that I know with Josh. There was never a moment that he just wasn't ready for the fight. And Pat, when Pat came across the hall, his very first job was with me. I was his troop commander, and he was a highly talented, spot on kid, and it's interesting for me now to see this wise sage Medal of Honor winner Pat Payne, where, man, we busted his chops for months as the new guy. And the other thing I would say is, while that is a deserved honor for Pat, that handful of men that were around him and around Josh are equally as heroic, if not even more heroic. And those are names that you'll never know. And I would like to, the listeners to this, man, say a prayer of thanks to these men and women, because a lot of us are retiring and retired now. If Pat isn't retired, he will be soon.
He's retired. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All that era of those guys, they called them 9/11 babies. So when 9/11 started, for for 20 years, from 2001 and 2021, they were fighting, and so those guys are starting to retire. And just, yeah, pray for peace, pray for shalom for these guys, pray for peace for a guy like Pat Payne. Carrying that Medal of Honor around your neck, that is a heavy lift.
Without a doubt. And to the viewers, the reason Joshua Wheeler has stood out to me, I remember where I was the day Joshua Wheeler got killed. I didn't know who he was. I had zero connection. I was sitting in the offices of my old job. I was sitting at a table in the middle of the room, and my buddy Neil was sitting right next to me. It was early in the morning, and MSNBC had flashed Joshua Wheeler's photo when he's in like his dress where he's got, the medals and all that stuff. And they're like, a U.S. serviceman has been killed in Iraq. I turned to my buddy and I said, I guarantee you that guy's in Delta Force. Guarantee it. And at that time, there was no details. It was this guy's been killed on what they think was a rescue mission, which obviously turned out to be true. And then the New York Times, I believe, wrote kind of an in-depth dive. And they said the last thing Joshua Wheeler ever said, because, the Kurds were getting overrun, the mission was not going well. He turned to the guys behind him and he said, follow me, the Kurds behind him. And he stepped through that breach, and that's where he took that AK round that killed him. I believe it was an AK. And that level of bravery to turn and just say, follow me, that is American exceptionalism at its absolute best. And I hope everyone watching this knows who Joshua Wheeler is. If you don't, Google him. And Pat Payne and everyone, I mean, just class, you can't beat him.
And brother, those are the same Kurds I was talking about in 2002. Some of them are the exact same men. Some of them are their children. You know what I mean? That was the thing that used to blow me away too, going back to Iraq and Afghanistan, is linking back up with these guys. And I've been back to Iraq since in the counter sex trafficking stuff. They're still surviving, So yeah, I agree with you. So yeah, I'll say it one more time, man. Say a prayer of thanks for men like Josh Wheeler and women like Josh Wheeler, because they fill our ranks. And this idea that George Orwell saying of, brave men stand on these walls, that's why I sleep peacefully at night. That is no joke, people. There are people, there are men and women that are on these walls, and they will climb off that wall and go into bad guy country just so you can sleep well at night. And while sometimes we get resentful about it, and sometimes we feel unappreciated, every single one of us would do it all over again.
Amen. I now want to ask you a question as a Christian. Like I said, you wrote the book, Where Have All the Heroes Gone? Which, the fact anyone can write a book to me is incredible. I don't think I could ever write a book, so that's wildly impressive. But as a Christian, one of the questions I find fascinating when I interview someone who's gone to war and is also a Christian, what do you say to people who might say, you can't kill people, you can't believe in combat, you can't go to war, and at the same time call yourself a follower of Christ? What would your response be to anyone who might suggest that?